What's up guys, this is Andong. Today we're going to be making a silky and rich Chinese style hot and sour soup, which has got to be one of the most popular Chinese style soups in the West. It's super quick and easy to make and a true crowd pleaser on a cold, wintry day like this one. Welcome to episode 6 of Soup Season. So even though hot and sour soup is really popular in Chinese restaurants all across the world, I don't think you can really say so in regards to China itself. I actually only ever had it in Taiwan, which for a whole number of reasons is a little bit of a different story than the mainland. So yeah, Taiwan is where this soup seems to be a little bit more common. There's actually a theory it made its way into Western Chinese restaurants across the world through the ports of Taiwan, and I think there is good reason to believe this story. The biggest clue to me is that a lot of old school Western Chinese food is based on Cantonese cuisine, and hot and sour soup is really not. But it's also not like this type of soup is unheard of in China. In fact, there is one place where a version of this soup is truly a big traditional thing, and that's the city of Wuxi in Central Eastern China. Steph and Chris over at Chinese Cooking Demystified have a really good video showing you exactly how to make this traditional version, and if you're in for a classic Chinese experience, that's certainly the way to go. And yes, there are other regions in China where a variant of this soup is a little bit of a thing, mostly in the north, but it's never huge. In fact, the only other regional variant that I took into account for my research was from central China, from the province of Sichuan. And there are two notable things about this variant. One is the use of an egg drop, which if you ask me works incredibly well to add a certain level of homey comfort to the dish. And secondly, over there they will actually add chilies. And why do I think it's worth pointing out that they use chilies over there in a hot and sour soup? Well, glad you asked, because normally that hot and sour soup actually refers to heat from white peppercorns and not from chilies. There is one thing though that pretty much all the versions you will ever find of this soup have in common, and that's thickening the soup with some type of starch. You might remember my video about the food hawkers of Singapore, in which I tasted a dish called lor mee that kind of reminded me of a hot and sour soup with the addition of alkaline noodles actually. That one was almost thick enough to be eaten with chopsticks, which I can say I really liked. I prefer using starch to give my soup a silky feel and not to make it, sliceable. But other than that, I thought the adaptability of hot and sour soup to Western taste buds was really fascinating, so I decided to kind of head further down that road and simplify the recipe, use a lot of Western ingredients, except for the ones that I find non-negotiable, to still be able to at least call this a Chinese-inspired soup. So we're ready to get started. To a pot on high heat, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of a neutral cooking oil and 3 scallions, but only the white parts that I've cut into fine rings. I like to add them now while everything's still cold because I think they infuse into the oil better this way. Now once simmering, I'm adding 5 big slices of ginger that I julienned, and then stir fry these bad boys until fragrant and add 150 grams of minced pork. For those who don't eat pork, just go for lamb or chicken, but I think what's great about adding some type of meat to the dish is that it's gonna help us turn the water that we'll be adding later into a fast stock. Now don't add me with this completely non-traditional next step, but hear me out. Lentils complement the meat with kind of like a peppery base flavor and add textural contrast and body to the broth. If you guys want a completely vegetarian version, by the way, just skip the meat and double the amount of lentils. In my case right here, they also help absorb the meat juices that are released while cooking and then help crisping up the meat faster. Now, as soon as I get a little bit of color on that meat, I'm gonna add my water. This is just the first round of adding water, so don't worry about how little it looks. Now add 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of sugar, and of course half a teaspoon of MSG, and let everything cook for 5 minutes. Next, tofu. Normally, traditionally, soft tofu is used, but I find it to fall apart, so I just prefer to use firm tofu and dice it up real fine. Then over here, I got wood ear mushrooms that I soaked in warm water earlier and julienned. This is a very common addition to the soup, so you'll definitely want to get your hands on those. The other type of mushroom that would normally go into the soup is a rehydrated dry shiitake mushroom, but I just use button mushrooms quartered because I like their texture more. Now, you guys know I'm a pretty lazy person, so instead of doing a ton of julienning, I just decided to grate these carrots in. It works just fine. And speaking of julienne and being lazy, we wanted julienned bamboo shoots, and in Berlin you can go to Asian grocery stores and they would have different preserved bamboo shoots in different shapes, but I just bought these pre-julienned bamboo shoots to save myself some time. But also, this is a really traditional ingredient for the soup and you don't want to skip this one. By the time you have all those ingredients cut up and ready to go, the stock with the lentils and the meat should be ready as well, so just toss them in and incorporate them into the soup. At this stage, it's getting pretty crowded in our soup base, so it's time to add some water. You can add even more if you want a thinner soup and bring everything to a simmer. If you ask me, hot and sour soup only really works if you have that silky mouthfeel, so we want to thicken it with some cornstarch. And I found 4 tablespoons to be a good amount for the 1.5 liters of water that I used. But you never ever want to add cornstarch directly into a hot soup. You want to first make a slurry by adding cold water, or in my case, I'll just be using the liquid seasonings, which are light soy sauce, then dark soy sauce for a little bit of color, and dark Chinese vinegar. And just a quick note on that while we're at it, I like to think that there are 2 broad categories of dark vinegar in Chinese cooking. One is gonna say mature vinegar, and it's great for noodles and dips and dumplings. It's kind of got this malty and bready thing going on a little bit. And then the other style of Chinese vinegar that you'll commonly find in a Western Asian supermarket, for example, is Xinjiang vinegar. It's great for seasonings or like making sweet and sour sauces. It's a bit more mellow and fragrant, so this is the one I want to use for this soup. Also, now is a good time to add some white pepper and mix everything until the starch is fully incorporated. You'll notice that we're adding the sauces and seasonings towards the end, and that's because white pepper and vinegar are very volatile, so they will lose their flavor if you add them too early. We're getting closer to the finish line, so now is a good time to do a final flavor and consistency check to see if everything is to your taste. And you know the drill, if something is missing, you can always add more, but you cannot really take things out. So I like to be on the side of adding too little in the beginning. So for now, I think the soup needs to be a little bit silkier, so I'm adding 2 more tablespoons of cornstarch dissolved in water. You can tell that the starch is working because, you know, it's usually activated and thickened around 65 degrees, which you can now see. I like this texture, so it's time to turn everything off. And now, with the heat off, we can actually take care of our very final steps. First, we're gonna beat 2 eggs and pour them straight into the broth. You wanna give those a super gentle and slow stir. There's plenty of residual heat in the soup, so that's what's gonna give us that egg drop effect. And then finally, finish everything off with just a little bit of sesame oil. And we're pretty much done. So let's put the soup to the test. Well, I think we're ready to start. I mean, the idea was to start doing soup season videos in the winter and then be outside in the great outdoors on these cold wintry days. And those days, they're certainly getting shittier, but they're not getting winterier. It's actually pretty warm, and I don't even know what the point of this was anymore. Anyway, it's called commitment. Commitment. That's what it is. Okay, so over here, we get the garnish for our soup, which is of course spring onions and cilantro. Let's have some delicious hot and sour soup. Whoa, look at how thick it is. This already looks pretty good, and all it needs is a little bit of garnish. If you like it hot, you can add a little more white pepper to your soup, so you get that fresh white pepper. It's being blown away by the... That's ridiculous. Oh, and also, you know how we covered that most of the heat from the hot and sour soup is actually not like chili heat, but pepper heat? Different things. If you like both, you can also add a little bit of sriracha. This is the perfect consistency I was looking for. It's thick, it's silky, but it's not slimy or goopy. Because you know, sometimes in Chinese cuisine, this thickening part is overdone. Not in this soup. Not in this soup, my friends. And now I can finally have a well-deserved spoonful of hot and sour soup. This has got to be one of the best soups in the world. It's such a feast of different textures and flavors coming together with every single spoonful. This is one of the best parts about the soup. To me, this has the perfect level of heat. Balanced out by that freshness of the ginger. And then there's Just so much richness from the eggs, that fried minced meat. All these mushrooms. And there's a reason I didn't go for shiitake mushrooms. I think they're too soggy. I don't like soggy mushrooms, but these button mushrooms in here, they kind of have a little bit of that crunch still, and that just makes them perfect. Carrots and the bamboo shoots provide a little bit of like a veggie base. The tofu, it's a filler, but this is a way to make tofu delicious. I think if you like that tangy aspect of the soup, you could add a little more vinegar, but don't do it while cooking. Do it when you serve the soup, like inside your serving bowl. This is delicious. And I'm gonna add a little more sriracha. Oh no, the sriracha is not traditional, but after cooking this soup, it's pretty clear that we do not give too many shits about tradition on this channel anymore. There used to be a time, not anymore. The soup is so good, I'm not gonna use a spoon. Those egg drops, if you ask me, not optional, non-negotiable. You have to have egg drops in your hot and sour soup. It's like my favorite part. It is imperative that you make this at home. If you have watched this far, you want to make this, then here's your last encouragement. Do it. Do it. Do it. Anyway, guys, I know you will like this. Please make this soup. Please take a picture. Please send it to me. Tag me on Instagram. I love seeing what you guys do. And with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next video.